Hello, today we're talking about my top 10 favorite rock albums of 1991. And this top 10 will be in no particular order. And this is a list that could definitely change at any time, but as of now, this is my top 10. Again, in no particular order, but the album we're going to start off with is Ceremony by The Cult. This album would be their follow-up to Sonic Temple, which was commercially a fairly big album for the band, especially when you got hits like Edie and Firewoman, and that album did very well for the band, but they would follow up that album with Ceremony, which unfortunately commercially didn't do as well as Sonic Temple. And you also have to think about the landscape of music at the time, 1991. Grunge was really getting hot around that time, especially thanks to a certain album that you will see later in this video. But yeah, 1991 was definitely pretty crazy year for music. A lot of big releases, a lot of notable names in terms of albums in that year, but fortunately Ceremony was not a big one during that year, which is a bummer, because I feel like this album is actually kind of underrated. I mean, because to me this album does have some of the band's best work, such as songs like Wild Hearted Son and Heart of Soul, which I think is one of the band's best ballads. And you also have some pretty good deep cuts on here too, like Full Tilt, that's a solid rocker. And I also like the song White. Hands down one of their most underrated songs in my opinion. Really like that song a lot. And I think the album also has probably one of the band's best album openers, at least in my opinion, with the title track. Definitely one of my favorites on the album. Earth Mofo is another solid rocker on the album. You move towards the second half and I definitely enjoy Sweet Salvation, another more underrated song off the album. But yeah, another pretty good album from The Cult. Maybe not their number one best, but still another pretty good album in my opinion from them. But moving to the next album, we'll be going to Live with their debut album, Mental Jewelry. So yeah, an album that kind of gets overshadowed by the album that would come after this one. That album, of course, being Throwing Copper, which would come out in 1994. And that album is often considered Live's best, and I would probably agree with that. But when it comes to my second favorite Live album, I'd maybe go with this one. It's either going to be this one or Secret Samadhi for me, but for now, I might go with this one though. But Secret Samadhi, again, is also really great too. But with this album, you do get some of the band's best work in my opinion, with songs like Pain Lies on the Riverside, another solid anthem for them. Same with track number 2, Operation Spirit, another really good song. Move towards some of the lesser known songs on here. I really enjoyed Tired of Me. That's always been one of my personal favorites on the album. You move towards the more melodic songs on here. I really like Mirror Song. That's kind of an overlooked song on the album. But yeah, you do get some solid deep cuts on here, such as Waterboy and Take My Anthem. And Beauty of Grey is another one of the more fan favorites on the album from what I've noticed. I definitely do enjoy that song too. But yeah, all around, pretty good debut album from Live. But next we'll be moving to Mr. Bungle with their self-titled album, their self-titled debut, and this is definitely my favorite Mr. Bungle album. I mean, some people point to California as their favorite, and California would definitely be in close second for me, but personally I go with this one as my favorite. Really dig the weirdness, the wackiness, the experimentation that you get on this album. I mean, experimental, whether it be song structures or mixtures of styles. I mean, definitely a pretty interesting listen, I'd say. And if you're a big Faith No More fan or a big Mike Patton fan, then this is definitely a must listen in my opinion. Especially if you like Mike Patton. I mean, definitely got to give this album a listen for sure. But if I were to name some of my favorites on here, they'd be Quote Unquote, which is definitely one of my favorite songs from the band. And maybe my favorite album opener, maybe ever, from this band. I really like that song a lot. Slowly Growing Deaf is another really good song. Musically, I like what they're doing in that song. Squeeze Me Macaroni is another fun song on the album. When it comes to the more lengthy songs on here, Egg might be my favorite. I really like that one. My Ass Is on Fire is another one of my favorites on the album. But yeah, definitely a pretty interesting listen. And if you somehow haven't heard this album, definitely check it out. Really good stuff. Gotta love Mike Patton. Moving to the next album, definitely one of the biggest albums of 1991, and maybe the biggest thing to come from grunge, depending on who you ask. But that album is Nevermind by Nirvana. I mean, you can't talk about rock, alternative, or anything like that in 1991 without mentioning this album. Definitely a commercial juggernaut. I mean, you have songs in here that are still played to this day on the radio. Songs like "Smells Like Teen Spirit" and "Come As You Are." "Come As You Are" definitely being probably a top 3 Nirvana song for me. And I'll be honest, it's my favorite Nirvana album. I mean, yeah, that's kind of a basic pick. I get that, but I don't know. I still think this is a really good album. I mean, some people point to In Utero as their favorite too, which is also understandable. In Utero is another pretty good album, but personally, I put this one at the top. I mean, the first 5 songs especially are definitely really good. "Smells Like Teen Spirit," which is definitely a big anthem for the band. "In Bloom," "Come As You Are." "Breed" is really good too. I like "Lithium." "Lithium" probably being one of my favorite singles from them. You move towards the second half where you get some of the more lesser known songs like "On a Plane," which has grown to be maybe, I don't know about top 5, but maybe top 10 Nirvana song for me. I really like "On a Plane," definitely an overlooked song on the album. You also have "Something in the Way," which is of course in the Batman movie, and I do like that song too. But yeah, you do get some pretty good deep cuts on the album, I'd say, especially with songs like "Lounge Act" and "On a Plane." "Drain You" too is also really good, but yeah, rest in peace Kurt Cobain. Definitely still a really good album all these years later. And now we're moving to another big name in the world of grunge, especially when it comes to albums. 10 by Pearl Jam. Another commercial juggernaut when it comes to 1991, especially with songs like "Alive" and "Even Flow" and "Jeremy," which are of course some of the best songs on here. And I'd say the same for track number 5, "Black." Absolutely love "Black." Definitely one of my favorite Pearl Jam songs, and musically all around really good stuff. And moves towards some of the deeper cuts on the album. I really enjoy "Dig." That's another pretty solid rocker on the album. "Garden" I think is maybe maybe a top 10 or top 15 Pearl Jam song for me. I really like "Garden." I really dig the melody you get in that song. "Once" I think is one of the band's best album openers. I mean, you really can't go wrong with really any of the songs in here. But of course, with any album, there are some songs that are maybe more stronger, more interesting than some others, but still all around, definitely a grunge classic, and yeah, really good stuff. But next we're moving to another more wacky number, or another more wacky or more interesting listen with Primus, "Sailing the Seas of Cheese." Kind of like with Mr. Bungle, this is another more weirder band, but Primus is definitely one of the most unique bands of the 90s. They don't really sound like really any other band, and this was actually the last band I saw live. I actually saw them live a couple days ago. Saw them at the Spokane Pavilion, and they were definitely awesome. Put on a really great show, and it's pretty good song choices within the set list. I did not expect to see them play "Fisticuffs" and "Bob" and some others. I was like, all right. And of course they do play some of the bigger names like "My Name Is Mud" and "Time and the Cat" and some others. But anyways, back to this album. Often considered one of the band's best, and I definitely agree with that. I mean, you have some of their biggest songs on here like "Jerry Was a Race Car Driver," which still holds up, which I still dig to this day, and also "Tom and the Cat" too. I definitely dig Les's vocals in that song especially, and of course the bass lines and the bass work in that song for sure. "Those Damn Blue Collar Tweakers" is definitely maybe a top 5 Primus song for me. Absolutely love that song. You move towards some of the more lesser known songs on here. I really like "Is It Luck" and "Sergeant Baker." But yeah, all around, definitely another really great album. And if you're looking for something a bit more unique or a bit more outside the box, or maybe outside of the norm, however you want to put it, definitely check out that album. Really good stuff. Moving on to the next album, we got "Blood Sugar Sex Magic" by Red Hot Chili Peppers. And this is definitely one of the fan favorites in their discography, and for good reason. Definitely was a really big album for the band, especially with songs like Suck My Kiss and Give It Away, and of course Under the Bridge. When it comes to the singles on this album, Suck My Kiss might be my favorite. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do of course still enjoy Under the Bridge and Give It Away, but again, when it comes to the singles on this album, Suck My Kiss is maybe my favorite. Break the Girl is also really good. I definitely dig Anthony Kiedis' vocals in that song especially. But I think the album also has some pretty good deep cuts, such as songs like The Righteous and the Wicked and If You Had to Ask. But yeah, all around another really good album from 1991, and probably one of my favorite albums of 1991 in general. But now we're moving to the world of prog rock with Rush, Roll the Bones. Now, when it comes to prog rock bands from like the 60s, 70s, I feel like Rush was really the only band in 91 that dropped a pretty solid album. I mean, Yes came out with Union, which I'm not too big on that album. That album does have its fans, but for me, I'm not too big on that album. Has a few songs I like, but that's about it for me. And then Genesis also put out We Can't Dance, which is another album that I'm not too big on. 2 or 3 decent tracks, but that's it. But again, that's just my opinion. And I'm mainly talking about like the bigger names in prog rock, but yeah, Roll the Bones. I personally really dig the album. Of course, it does show off the more radio-friendly side of Rush, but still, I think you get some pretty quality stuff here. I mean, I personally like the title track. I mean, I know many fans are not big on that rap part, which, I mean, over the years, as I've listened to the song more and more, and especially nowadays, I'm not too big on the rap part. I'm kind of with the older fans where the rap part doesn't really do much for me, but I can still listen to it just fine, but it's easily the weakest part of the song. I mean, I'm sure no one can argue with me on that, but I still dig the title track. Dreamline, I think, is a pretty good way to open up the album. Bravado is also really good. I do dig Getty's vocals in that song. I do think you get some pretty good lesser-known songs on here, like The Big Wheel, which is maybe one of my favorite deep cuts from Rush. I really like that song a lot. Neurotica is also really good, too. I do like Where's My Thing, another pretty good instrumental from the band. But yeah, all around, pretty good album. Excuse me, a pretty good album. And when it comes to 90s Rush, that album is maybe my favorite. I can see how some people might point to Counterparts as their favorite when it comes to 90s Rush, but personally I go with Roll the Bones. But Counterparts, again, another pretty good album. Definitely get some solid riff work in Counterparts especially. But moving to the next album in this video, and this is a contender for maybe being my favorite album in general from 1991. And that album is Badmotorfinger by Soundgarden. Rest in peace, Chris Cornell, of course. But yeah, this is really a perfect album from front to back. Not a single weak track on it at all. I mean, of course, the singles on the album are still also really good. Rusty Cage, Outshine, which is definitely one of the band's best singles. I definitely dig The Heaviness of Jesus Christ Pose, another really good single from the band. Slaves and Bulldozers, a song that definitely goes hard. I mean, and definitely one of the best vocal performances from Chris on the album is in that song, Slaves and Bulldozers. You move towards the second half, I really like Room 1,000 Years Wide. Always been one of my personal favorite Soundgarden songs. New Damage is a contender for maybe being my favorite album closer from the band. Holy Water, I think, is one of their best deep cuts. But yeah, all around, really great album, and definitely one of my favorite albums of all time, and maybe my favorite album when it comes to the world of grunge, if I'm being honest. If not, then it's definitely close. But now for the final album for this video, we'll be moving to Van Halen with For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. This will be their third album with Sammy Hagar. Now, with this band, when it comes to the fan base, you're going to have your Roth fans, and then you have your Hagar fans, and those who just prefer one over the other, or you have your fans that like both. I'm one of the people that likes both eras. But yeah, you definitely get some of the best songs from the Hagar era on this album, such as Pound Cake, which I think is definitely maybe one of their best singles. I really like that song a lot. Pretty solid anthem and a solid way to open up the album. Runaround is also really good. I also dig some of the deep cuts on the album, such as "In and Out," which, if I remember correctly, is one of the longer songs on the album. "The Dream Is Over" is also really good. I also dig "Man on a Mission," pretty catchy song. And you also have one of the bigger songs from the Hagar era with "Right Now," another really good song. But yeah, still really dig the album a lot. And now, it's not my favorite Van Halen album. When it comes to my favorite Van Halen albums, the debut and Fair Warning are my favorites. Fair Warning would be at the top, while the debut would be in close second, of course. But for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, definitely a really good album in my opinion. But yeah, that is my top 10 favorite rock albums of 1991. Let me know your thoughts on my top 10 in the comment section below. Let me know your top 10 rock albums of 1991, and let me know if some of these albums might be in your list and all the good stuff. But anyways, thanks for watching. Please leave a comment and a like, subscribe. Have a nice day, and take care.